I'm looking back constantly because I'm like, he's coming, he is going to come.
Hey folks, this week we have a very special recording with our new friend Anna. Anna is a force for empowerment. She is a domestic abuse survivor. She has a really wild, really harrowing story, and she emerged not just resilient, but also dedicated to helping others heal. Anna is a certified mental health first aider and trauma recovery coach, and she guides individuals and groups towards reclaiming their lives. And she's also the founder of what's called Brave and Free, a vibrant online community that tackles mental health, trauma, and its often unseen aspects with openness and also with humor, which right up our alley. We love this conversation, and it's there's a good chunk here where it's less of a conversation and it's really just a story. Anna is a great storyteller, and she has a wild, just mind-boggling experience that she went through. And we are so glad that she was able to get through what she got through so that we can have conversations like we had with her today. Anna, thank you so much for being a guest on our show. It means the world to us. And to you, listener, thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoy the podcast. Please share it with your friends, share it with your folks. And hey, stick around for the end of the episode where we talk about some weird records in the Guinness Book of World Records surrounding eating. It's it's something. All right, enjoy this conversation with our new friend Anna. This is going to be a treat. This is the second time in a short period of time that the three of us have had the pleasure of speaking with somebody from all the way over in the UAE. Today we are joined by Anna. And the last time we spoke to our friend Adel, we were talking about mental health struggles, and we were talking about some like schizophrenia type diagnoses. Well, today with Anna, we're going to be diving into PTSD, complex PTSD to be specific, and that C before the dash PTSD is very important. I think there's kind of quite a difference between CPTSD and PTSD, and the differences. Well, I guess we're going to learn it today. Anna, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you on the show. Before we get into it, maybe just take a second, introduce yourself to the three of us, to all of our listeners. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'll start by saying that I was born and grew up in the United Arab Emirates. I'm an only child. Went on to becoming what I would like to say a domestic violence survivor who was diagnosed with CPTSD, chronic depression, and anxiety disorder. And this entire experience and journey that I've been on inspired me to create awareness around these subjects across the spectrum. And because of that, I thought, well, how do I do that? And I created this page on Instagram that's now sort of grown into a community, I would like to think. And it's called Brave and Free. And what I do there is I share as openly as possible, as authentically as possible, and as radically as possible about the nuances around trauma, the impact of trauma on mental health, and various mental health challenges. Alongside that, I am also a trauma recovery coach and a mental health first aider who is passionate about supporting people on their healing journey. So that's me.
I mean, I think we're going to get into it in a little bit, but I was perusing your Instagram page. Again, that's at I am brave and free. Yep. And that piece about, sharing as radically as possible, very much stands out. And I think we'll get to it because there's a couple of like little sort of clips that I pulled that I want to show you guys because I think they're great. But before we get into that, maybe so you started off by saying that a lot of this stemmed from your diagnosis of complex PTSD and depression and anxiety, and that stemmed um, from uh, being a survivor of domestic violence, domestic abuse.
Yes.
If it's okay for you, if you're comfortable with it, maybe you can take us through that experience. What led to this? I guess this situation where you found yourself in a relationship that wasn't what you maybe originally intended it to be.
Sure. So it all started, I guess, as a child where I grew up with an alcoholic dad, and he struggled with addiction for almost as long as I can remember. Uh, I think because of that, I developed a lot of fears, a lot of feelings of feeling unloved, and this desire to find somebody or to find a space where I felt like I belonged, where I felt like I was seen. And I was always on the quest for that. And come teenage years, say around 18, my friends introduced me to this guy. And they said, well, he's a great guy. You've got to meet him. He's amazing. He's doing incredible things. And I think you really like him. And I think you really get a lot from talking to him and sharing what you're going through with your dad and everything else. And I said, well, okay. And I met him. And he was everything that they said he was: charismatic, admirable. He had a sense of mystery about him, which probably a girl like me would appreciate. And so we got talking. We met up. A couple of weeks down the line, he asks me out, and for the first time, I said no, which is something I wouldn't usually do. And in hindsight, I'm thinking of the fact that I probably said no because he wasn't the typical guy that I would date. I would date the more, I hate to use the label, but the bad boy. And here was somebody who was actually doing good things. He was actually studying in Australia to become a pastor at a Bible school. And
Wow.
this was not really sitting well with me. And I was like, okay, this is strange. And I said no, but he was persistent. And eventually I said to myself, well, okay, let's give it a shot. I don't lose anything. If it doesn't work out, I'll tell him it's not working out. Except that I didn't know that this was a one-way ticket to hell.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is when we started dating, there was a whole lot of what we call now love bombing.
Mm-hmm.
So he was showering me with gifts. He was taking me out to all of these fancy dinners. He even cooked me dinner. He wanted to spend every day with me, wanted to be in touch with me all the time. And then gradually, this transitioned very seamlessly into manipulation and control. But it was all perfectly packaged in the sense that he would say, well, I want you to do this because it's in your best interests. Or I don't want you to talk to these friends because they're a bad influence on you. Or I don't think you should be spending as much time with your family because your dad's an alcoholic and that wouldn't have a good impact on you. Or why do you wear makeup? You look beautiful just as you are. And when things are put that way, it's kind of difficult, or at least for me, it was difficult to see through the fact that there was a possibility he was trying to control and manipulate me.
Mm.
And well, at some point, he started getting even more manipulative and controlling, where he would follow me on my trips, where I would go with my family. So if I was traveling to India with my family, he would insist that he come along. He started getting very aggressive with my dog. So kind of doing things to get a reaction out of me. And I started to sense this fear building up. But at the same time, I was like, well, I've seen what's going on at home. And when my dad's under the influence, he tends to abuse my mom. And so there's this conditioning or this mindset that abuse is the norm to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so finally, at 19, he asks me to marry him. And I'm like, what? I'm 19 and I'm going to get married? This sounds bizarre. And there was no real proposal or asking me. It was just like, we need to get married because, well, I am a pastor. I come from a culture that is extremely uh, close minded or have these different conceptions. There are a lot of societal expectations. Being who I am, doing what I do, I need to get married, and we need to get married quickly. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, I'm not ready for this. But he didn't hear any of that. He was just like, no, we have to get married. And I'm in this position where I'm filled with fear. And to me, the easiest way out of this situation was not to say no, but to say yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I was afraid of how he'd react if I said no. And I was also comparing my situation to, oh, what would be better? Being with him, where my needs are met, and well, he has some sort of a temper issue, but I guess that's okay, versus being at home in a very volatile situation where my dad's drinking every day, getting drunk every day. There's like a lot of violence that I'm exposed to. And so I chose to get married to him. 1 year into the marriage, the gears changed, and he started neglecting me. He was no longer, around me, wanting to know what I'm doing. Just started neglecting me, and I was drowning because I was on my own in his house with his family, trying to figure out how I'm supposed to be, how I'm supposed to adapt to this new culture, and I was literally lonely and didn't know who to lean on. This was sort of like a Princess Diana situation going into the palace and just being exposed to everything and being told, okay, here's how you got to act. Here's what you got to do. You're now a pastor's wife. You've got to dress up this way. You can't talk this way, and all of that. And I'm overwhelmed beyond words at that point. And then this one day, this strange thing happened. I was clearing my cupboard and there was a phone charger. And I was on a stool. I took the charger. I flung it back, hoping it would land on the bed. But unfortunately, it landed on his face. And he comes to me and he slaps me across the face and he's like, what the hell was that? Don't ever do that again. And I'm like, I was shocked because I'm like, well, that was a mistake. I didn't mean to do that. I just wanted to actually for it to land on the bed because I had nothing to keep it on. But he just did that, walked away, and I was a bit stunned because I didn't expect that.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, I'm like, I think this is a big mistake. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why I married him. I don't know what's going on, but this is not what I signed up for. And so I meet a friend. I tell her what I'm feeling. Long story short, the information reaches him. He finds out I had that conversation. Tables turn massively. My phone is thrown onto the wall, smashed to smithereens, and he's abusing me verbally, physically, threatening me and saying, well, how could you tell what's going on between us to your friends? And you're never going to tell them anything anymore. What happens between us stays between us. And I was shocked. I was so shocked that even while those things were happening, he was abusing me. I don't think I had a voice or nothing would come out, not a scream, not a sound that was coming out of me. And as the days progressed and as the months progressed, he was so insecure or worried that I would tell people how I'm feeling or that I would tell people that I wanted to end the marriage that he started doing, like taking my phone away, or if I had my phone, he was checking my message counters. He was putting spyware on my laptop to see what websites I was visiting or who I was emailing or chatting with. He said, well, you can't get a job outside. You can't go to finish your school. I didn't have a bank account. I didn't have insurance. So pretty much felt trapped in my own house. Well, I didn't even have a key to the house when it come to think of it. And the abuse escalated because people started to see that something's not okay, and people started to ask me if I'm okay. And when he would see people reaching out, he'd get mad about it because he wanted to isolate me from everybody. And the more people reached out and the more I responded to that compassion and care, the more I would be abused or questioned or threatened. And the abuse escalated from verbal to physical, and at some point it became sexual in nature. And so the sexual abuse was a form of punishment. And this took place for about, I'd say, 4 to 5 years, over a span of 4 to 5 years. And it happened for so long because whoever I ended up telling or reaching out to help for was either too afraid to help me because of who he was, or they thought, well, we don't want to get involved. This is your drama. Or they thought, if we help you, we'd be breaking up a marriage. And so there are these religious beliefs associated with that. And so there I am, stuck. Certain people didn't know how to deal with the situation, so they went and confronted him. And they go like, oh, well, we heard so-and-so thing. Is it true? And he'd deny it and then come back home, and I'd get double the abuse because he knows where it's all originated from. And at some point, I was utterly depressed. I wanted to sleep most of the day. I wouldn't eat. I probably was a size 0. I looked anemic. I probably was anemic. There came a day where I said, I can't take this anymore. And there were 2 attempts where I tried to take my life. They failed. And I said, well, I think there's no way out of this. I'm just going to be here for the rest of my life. It was in 2011, this lady walked in to the church and shared her story of surviving abuse. And that's when my eyes just lit up because I was like, oh, this might be a chance to share my story with her and get help. And I did speak to her a couple of weeks later, and she was the person who actually understood what I was going through. And I said to her, well, I need to get out of this situation because I'm done, because it's reached a point where he's threatening me. He's doing things to me that I cannot possibly take anymore. I'm literally waking up in the morning and I'm drinking from the bottle of wine because I need strength to face the day. And I said, this is no way to live. And she said, okay, let's work on a safety plan for you. And so the options were go to the police, find a shelter, go back home. Going back home was not an option because my family wasn't ready to see me break my marriage. And of course, my mom was a person who endured abuse with my dad. So you can see where that comes from. The fact that she wants me to make it work. Secondly, I was an expat in a country where I didn't really know what my rights were. So I just wasn't comfortable reaching out to the legal system because I just felt I'm going to be sent back home. And so the next option was to leave the country. And so my friend reaches out to a couple of nonprofits in India, out of which one responded. And they said, well, if Anna can make her way here to Delhi, we'd be so happy to support her. And we're like, oh, great, this is great. But the question was, how the hell was I supposed to get out of the country? Because I didn't have my passport. My passport was under lock and key in his parents' bedroom, in a study, literally locked in a drawer. And here's what I start doing. I start doing passport test runs. That's what I call it. So whenever his parents would leave the house, or he wasn't around, I would, from my bedroom, time myself, go to the parents' bedroom, go to the drawer, find the key, open it, see my passport's there. Okay, close it, keep the key back, come back to my room, check the time. I'm like, okay. And I kept doing this for a couple of months because I just wanted to muster the strength to and the time to be able to grab that and go if I needed to. But to my luck, to my good luck, my husband comes to me at this point and says, well, we need to go on a trip to the US for a conference and you need to get a visa. I was like, okay, so apply for your interview and let's go get your visa done. The funny part is that he doesn't give me any sort of documentation to back up my application. And so, of course, it's going to get rejected. Gets rejected. I come back home. His dad is furious. And he's like, how could you go without taking documentation? I'm like, well, I don't have any financials to show because I don't have a bank account. And so it was on my husband to give his financials. So I had to apply for another interview. And this time what I did was I didn't choose the date that was the nearest date. I chose a date that was 2 to 3 weeks after. And I said to myself, well, let me try this. And I kept the passport with me. And I said, I hope they don't remember that it's not with them and that it's with me. And they forgot. And so that's when I told my friend, I have my passport. This may be it. I have 5,000 dirhams under my bed that I've saved over 6 years, which is not very much. And I said, well, take this money. Please buy me my ticket. Please buy me essentials. I'm not going to be able to take too much. I started giving my clothes to her in small portions. I started giving her my important documents. And I said to her, I am so scared to plan this escape. Can you please help me plan this? And she was so brave and so kind to do that for me because that's something no one else had ever done or had the courage to do. And she planned it. She booked my ticket. She bought my essentials. She picked the date. It was a Friday. We were supposed to have a church service. I had to pretend that I was sick, pretended, but my husband didn't buy into it. I had to go to church. Passport's in my pocket. I'm all set. I'm like at the front row and I'm waiting for a moment that I can pretend I'm going to the washroom. My husband goes missing for a second. I'm like, oh God, where is he? And apparently he was sitting in the church office talking to some people who wanted to join the church. And this was completely out of the ordinary. It never happens, but it happened that day. And that gave me a moment or a couple of minutes to slip out of the church hall, go around the back to the car where my friends were waiting for me. They drove me to the airport. I got there, I checked in. I'm looking back constantly because I'm like, he's coming. He is going to come and he is going to get me. I'm passed through immigration. I get to my boarding gate. My flight gets delayed. Oh my God. I'm like losing my shit. I'm like, this is it. You know, if I go back, I'm over. And thankfully, I get on that flight and I reach Delhi. And he does not get to me. He only realizes that I've left the country a couple of hours after I've taken off. And
What was that? What was
Oh
that
my God.
moment like
My
when
heart,
you?
I just want to say, like,
Oh my
that
God.
story, my heart was beating out of my chest. When you were
I know,
like,
too.
my flight got delayed, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
no.
I know.
Holy
When-
Oh
shit.
my God.
What was that moment like when you got on the plane and sort of
Ooh.
knew that you were off?
Mhm. Yeah, as soon as it took off the runway, like, what was
like
that?
was there relief in that
Yeah.
moment, or was it just like, you know, it's just still you're always running?
there was relief. There was also guilt. And I think I cried the entire flight. I didn't
Yeah.
eat because I was like, I can't believe this is happening. I cannot believe that I am actually sitting here on this flight. Like, this is close to the impossible.
Mm.
But I also felt guilt because I was like, oh my God, like, what are all those people going to think that I ran away? What is my mom going to think? She's going to be heartbroken.
Mhm.
But I think my pain was so monumental that it reached a point where I would do anything to leave, and nothing could stop me at that point because that's how bad it was.
Mm.
You said something earlier that like towards the beginning of your story, and yeah, like echoing Jer's sentiment there, that was a roller coaster of a of a story, where I get the sense from speaking to having spoke to quite a few people who have experienced domestic violence, domestic abuse,
Mhm.
and I think one of the most sort of like fascinating aspects to a lot of those stories is the early time
Yeah.
of that relationship where only in hindsight there's
Mhm.
really the realization that things were a certain way, and that they gradually bleed into this new paradigm that by the time you realize that you're actually in it,
Yeah.
you're so in it that it feels like there's no turning back.
Right.
And when you mentioned that you said I chose to get married.
Mm-hmm.
Did it, in hindsight, did it feel like a choice, or did it feel like it was the only path? Like it was like the decision was made for you. Like, do you feel like you made that choice, or do you feel like it was laid out in front of you?
It was definitely laid out in front of me. I wasn't really given much of a choice because he was so persistent. He was so adamant that we get this done. And as much as I would have liked to put up a fight and say no, that didn't seem like an option to me, in
Mhm.
all honesty, because I didn't know who I was up against.
Mhm.
And I didn't know what hill he would put me through, or if he would harm my parents, or how he'd get back at me, if he would be vengeful. I wasn't so sure, and I was just too scared to even know what that could possibly be or look like.
Mhm.
And so really, it was fear that made me do that, made me make that choice. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think something that highlights too, and something that really stood out to me when you were telling your story is that there's I think there's sometimes stigma around domestic violence survivors that like that like why didn't they just leave, like they could have
Mhm.
just gotten out of the situation.
Yeah.
And something that really I think is highlighted by your story is that one, it's really difficult to leave in this situation because of the fear of that sort of vengeance that that person will take against you.
Yeah.
But the second part of that is also the childhood trauma that you experience
Yeah.
and how
Mhm.
that shapes your sort of expectations around relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you can maybe talk a little bit more about the role of childhood trauma and how that plays a big part in how people can sometimes end up in these situations.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, from my experience, what I've learned is that childhood sets the stage for who we become and how we behave in our adulthood. You know, it's where we're nurtured, it's where the foundation is laid, it's where we're molded, where we learn how to respond to situations. It's it's crazy because it all starts with a child that is in her mother's womb or in his mother's womb, and whatever trauma the parent is going through kind of passes down into the home that this child is brought into because it's unresolved. And so the child's exposed to that. And that's what the child sees and knows. And that's what the child becomes familiar with. Having said that, when you're in a household where there's abuse, whether the child's being abused themselves by their caregivers or their protectors, or whether they're exposed or witnessing abuse, all they can think about at that time is not be able to rationalize and think, well, okay, I'm not given attention because something's going on there with my parents. The immediate understanding that I had, and I would believe a lot of other kids would have, is that I'm unlovable, I'm unseen, I don't matter, you know, I don't deserve to be given attention. Because at that point, that's the understanding that we have. What we see is reality because we don't have that logical or rational explanation. No one's teaching us that at that point. And then when we see that, we grow up to think we're unlovable. And we grow up not knowing what a lovable relationship is like. So when you don't know what that looks like, you're going to a relationship and you're like, well, I don't know if this constitutes a healthy relationship or an abusive relationship. Well, it's maybe abuse is sort of okay. And that's where, everything gets really complex because you just don't have a model, to look back on or to look up to and think of, well, this is what healthy is, or this is what unhealthy is. And on top of that, you have this low self-esteem, you have low sense of self-worth because, again, you were not given that love, whether it's even the touch of your parent, hugging you, or the glow in your parents' eyes when they see you, or just sort of even smiling at you and making you feel like, oh, you're loved. We love you. We're here for you. We're here to protect you. And when you're not exposed to that, when you don't have that, you grow up searching for that and wanting to fight for the love in relationships where you're not really getting the love because that's what you're familiar with. And it's weird because you think, okay, well, if you went through a bad experience, why would you not run away from that experience and go in the opposite direction, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the way it works, I think psychologically, especially when it's childhood trauma, is that you go with what's familiar. It's like a known enemy is so much better than an unknown friend. And you're like, well, I know this. I know what this feels like. I'm familiar with it. So let's go with this. The good stuff, I don't know what that is. That makes me nervous. I don't know what to expect. I'm not going there. And that's how the cycle just continues.
I just I'm really thankful that you've laid all this out the way that you have.
Yeah.
And especially because I think that there's quite a few people out there that maybe just aren't aware of like the multitude of layers that are involved when it comes to domestic abuse.
Yeah.
And it was only last week that we released an episode about this exact topic. We spoke with author Denise Chong, who recently released a book called Out of Darkness, which is the story of Romana Manzur, who it was a story of that made international headlines of a woman who was actually living in Delhi, I believe,
She was in Bangladesh.
She was in Bangladesh. Okay, but was she going to Delhi University? Maybe I'm wrong.
know.
Anyway,
Yeah.
regardless, she was in India, and she was also in an abusive relationship,
Mhm.
and she did not try to escape the way that you did, right? She thought to herself, okay, this is not working,
Mhm.
and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell my husband that I
Mhm.
can't do this anymore, and I'm going to file for divorce.
Mhm.
And this resulted in her being attacked in a brutal attack. She's lucky to have lived.
Yeah.
She had her eyes gouged out. She had her face was mutilated. And it's like when you hear people that respond or react to a story like yours,
Mhm.
and they think to themselves, well, why wouldn't you just tell them, like, I'm getting a divorce? Why wouldn't you just like up and leave? It's not so simple. And it's like you having to put together this sort of like, the long con sort of like
Mission
Ocean's
Impossible.
12,
Yeah.
Mission Impossible,
Yeah.
timing yourself. I mean, you would probably be a really great bank robber if now that you have these skills of built in of timing yourself going into the room. I mean, it really does take that sort of that over the top extra level of safety, because just by simply coming out and stating something like, I'm filing for divorce, could result in the end of your life. I mean,
Yeah.
and there's multiple examples that exist out there. So to hear your story and to hear the way that you laid it out, and to also hear you sort of explain your childhood and where you came from, it's just, there's so many facets to how this pans out. There's so many layers to why it's not just a simple, well, why don't you just XX, dot, dot, dot. There is no simple answer. And I'm so glad that you were able to get on that flight and get the fuck out of there. One thing that I am curious about when we're talking about PTSD, and we're talking about complex PTSD, can you just give a quick overview of the differences between, a PTSD diagnosis and a complex PTSD diagnosis, to remind us and some of our listeners?
Okay. So the first thing is that PTSD is a mental condition that people have when they have been exposed or witness a single distressing situation, sort of like a soldier going to war. He's on the battlefield. He comes back home. PTSD. Complex PTSD is a mental condition that a person has when they're exposed or witness chronic distress over a really long period of time. Hence the name complex. So really, those are the two differences. It's really about it. The only difference being that it's chronic, it's for a longer period of time. But when it comes to the symptoms, there are lots of symptoms that overlap when it comes to flashbacks, nightmares, hypervigilance, and a whole lot of other symptoms. They can be very similar in those ways.
I want to get into the sort of treatment of complex PTSD. I think maybe something that it would be an interesting way to explore that too is really understanding the experience of going to India and going into that shelter and receiving that help, because I think there's a lot of question marks, especially for people who are in that situation of like, well, what does that look like? What does it actually look like to go to a shelter and sort of get that support? And I'm curious, when you arrived in India, what was your experience like? Like, how do they sort of, try to work with you to get you back to that version of yourself that was lost so many years ago?
So in this situation, the organization that helped me did not have a shelter per se, but they did advocate for domestic violence victims and survivors, which means that they would represent them or provide them with legal advice and any kind of support that they needed. But this organization took an extra step because they're like, this girl's coming from Dubai and she probably has no idea what to do in Delhi. So they were so kind to set up spaces or set up hotels or have a apartment set up for me where I could stay. And then they gave me time to find a job. And it was also scary, to be honest, because I was going to a city that I'd never been to, completely different from the life in Dubai. I was crying, I think, for the first 6 months because I just couldn't deal with it. And but I have to say that without their support, I couldn't have done it. You know, they got me to get a lawyer pro bono, and that was really something for me because I needed people on my side to fight this case for me, because I knew that without, strong people on my side, there's a possibility that this guy's going to come or do something and take me back, which he did eventually attempt to do. But it was a process of them giving me the space that I needed, the time that I needed, and slowly exposing me to what normal life is like. It's kind of like being in a dark prison with no sunlight for years, and then suddenly you come out, and the sunlight is like bright in your face that you can't even see. And that's what it feels like actually coming out of an abusive relationship, 6 years, where you're trapped in so many ways, and then you're exposed to the real world. And you would think, oh, freedom. But no, it's actually quite scary. It's like, oh my God, this is too much. Sensory overload. Like, how do I do this? What do I do? Like, I've forgotten how to be myself. I don't even know who I am. And so you need to get exposed slowly in small parts. And that's what they did for me. They just gave me the support and resources I needed. And then I came to a point where I was able to get the help that I needed in terms of dealing with my symptoms and my mental health, the effects of trauma that it had on me. Yeah.
I imagine I think of like when my parents were going through. My parents had a pretty rough divorce when I was 15, and it went on for a long period of time. And I know my mom's mental health really took a massive toll during that time. And when I think back, and my memory of it is that a lot of the like initial process of like sorting out the legal side of things and the logistics of it just sort of happened. And like there was no healing or mental health support at that time. It was just like get through, like get to this next milestone or this next checkpoint and do whatever you can just to survive. And then once everything was said and done, then it's this like period of like recovery after the fact. And I think it's a common thing that we hear with a lot of people who go through physical illness too. If it's a cancer diagnosis, it's like just sort of survive through the treatment. And then once
like
the treatment is done,
like the tangible things that you
just got to do what you can to get to that next step and frankly stay alive. And then once you sort of get that all clear, it's like, oh, well, the thing is quote unquote done, but like now now the real work starts, and there isn't as much support for that period of time. Was that a similar experience for you?
It definitely was, because the conception that a lot of people had back then, and probably even today, is that once the abuse is over, it's over. So they constitute trauma as abuse, but really that's not how it works. Gabor Mate says it so well when he says that trauma is not what happened to you, it's what happens inside of you as a result of what happened to you, which means that the impact of the abuse is trauma. The impressions that are left behind is trauma. The wounds that are left behind is trauma. And so you think, even as a person, I would think, oh, it's over, freedom, I think I'm going to be okay. And all of a sudden you see all of these things happening to you that you really don't understand. Um, and then you're like, what's going on? Like, I'm having these nightmares, I'm having these flashbacks, I am suddenly hyper vigilant, I'm suddenly on edge, I can't sit in a car. Um, what's going on? I don't understand. And that's the point where I wanted to understand what the hell's going on with me, because I thought I was going crazy. And I thought I was beyond redemption. I was like, this is a lost cause. I got out of the situation. This is going to be one hell of a journey. And it is one hell of a journey. And I always like to use the analogy of a car crash, because it takes a split second to get into a car crash. Something goes wrong and boom. And what happens is probably your car gets totaled. Depending on what goes wrong, you might fracture your ribs, break a leg, have a bleeding head, the list goes on. You get into an ambulance, you get into the hospital, maybe you need to do surgery, you're in the ICU, you've got treatment plan, you've got physiotherapy, you've got a recovery plan when you get back home. And so when you think that a split second of an incident amounts to that much of work, imagine a trauma survivor or an abuse survivor who's been through so much for weeks or months or years. And so how much more of a recovery plan and time do they need?
Mm-hmm.
So much more, because everyone's putting that timeline on you that, oh, well, it happened then. Like, are you still going through it? Yeah, I am, because healing is a journey. And I don't know where the destination is, but I just know I'm going on this journey, and I just keep going, because that's all I know, that I have to keep moving forward. And I think that's what it's been about. It's been about understanding my trauma, understanding what's happened to me, and befriending it, not looking at it as the enemy and not fighting it, but saying, you know what, I'm sorry that you went through this. You didn't deserve to go through this. And we're going to, really talking to yourself as if you were talking to your inner child or talking to a friend, and comforting them. And really just befriending. That's the step. And then kind of understanding, okay, here's where I need help. This isn't working. Okay, let's try something else. This isn't working, or we need more help. Okay, let's go a step further. We need medication. In my case, I did. Got on medication. Medication's not working. Try another medication. So the journey is incredibly frustrating at times, because you're like, I already went through that. Why do I have to go through this? Like, why do I have to do the work for something that I didn't deserve in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
But that's the reality, like, it happened to you, but you're the only one who can change or make a difference within yourself. And we can't allow other people to do that. The work is within us at all times. And as frustrating as it may be, it is what it is.
How did you, sorry, we're still here. Brian's just fixing the camera there.
Yeah.
How did you, like, I know that PTSD, complex PTSD, can take a lot of, you just spoke to just the length of the journey, the length of time and effort that somebody can need to go through to arrive at a place of, some semblance of understanding or appreciation for what they've gone through, and to be able to work with that. Just being able to sit down across from, a therapist or a counselor and talk about what they've gone through is a major hurdle to get over. How did you find yourself going through that experience and then getting to a place where you feel like you can come on to, a show like ours and speak so openly, and, insightfully and confidently about your experience?
So, first it was about sitting and across a therapist and really feeling a sense of freedom, because I think for the first time in a long time, I could use my voice.
Mm.
I was heard, and I was heard without um, without something that was going to happen, without a consequence. I wasn't going to be punished for what I was saying. I wasn't going to be disbelieved. I wasn't going to be belittled or threatened. And that in itself was empowering, to just be able to sit there and say, this is what I feel. This is what happened to me. And the person's just listening to you. And that's like healing in itself, to just sit there and just be heard. And in learning how to express myself and express what I was going through, because at the beginning it's like, I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't know how to. I'm usually just saying, this is what happened, that is what happened, that is what happened. It was very factual. But we had to dig into, okay, that happened to you. And how did that make you feel? And how did that impact you? And what's going on for you? It's like, I almost forget that I was actually there, that this was happening to me. It's like I forgot that I even existed or mattered. What I felt mattered. And so lots of therapy, lots of talk therapy, lots of sharing what happened, from the most difficult moments to the things that I have not said to anyone that seemed gruesome, and really finding my voice there. And then actually, with the help of the nonprofit, they would tell me, well, Anna, you have a story, and the story needs to be heard, because there are people out there, there are women out there, there are maybe even men out there going through this, and they think they have no hope. They think they're stuck. They think that this is all that they have. They think they have no choice. So this is a moment for you to consider, to actually voice out, to actually talk about your story. And somehow I was open to it. And I started. I remember my first interview, I was like mumbling because I was so scared. And I'm like, oh my God, like this has never happened. But as I saw the impact that it was having, and people saying, oh my God, Anna, like that inspired me, that empowered me. I learned something I didn't know. I used to think this about abuse. I used to think that about abuse. I used to wonder why women don't leave. But now I know why. Now I have a different perspective. Now I know what abuse constitutes, because a lot of people were like, abuse, physical abuse. No, there are so many different kinds of abuse, even financial abuse. And so there was just a lot of awareness. There was a lot of eye-opening insights that were coming from personal experience. And when I saw that impact being made, I was like, okay, I want to keep doing this, because at least now I have a purpose for the pain. And if anything, I'm like, I cannot let this pain just sit there and be something that happened to me and feel defeated. I didn't want to feel that way. And I said, I need to use this for something. I need to win. I got out of that situation, and I need to use this to make a difference. And that's why now I'm creating all of this awareness. I'm speaking about it. And I love doing it because it empowers me and inspires me when I see people saying, this helps, this information helps. Like, I never knew this.
Mhm.
So
One of my favorite things about the way that you are outspoken
Mm-hmm.
about this type of stuff is your willingness to lean into the use of humor,
Mhm.
which, you know, especially when talking about things that pertain to, like, you know, complex PTSD and depression and anxiety. I feel like those are aspects of mental health that, like, maybe some people feel a little bit wary of like using humor around, whether
Mhm.
it's like they're speaking about it for themselves, or, you know, like that was one of the earlier things that we noticed when doing this podcast, is like our first episode where we decided to sit down and talk to somebody who is struggling with their mental health.
Yeah.
We were like, oh fuck, oh, I don't know, this might not go over well.
No jokes.
But you, like, your use of humor, I mean, I love it. It's like right up my alley. I want to show you guys a couple of pieces that Anna has put up. So for our listeners, I'll give you a little bit of context. This one here's a reel, and, you know, it's like this is what they say, and then like them : they say something, and then me, and then the reaction. So the them here, what it reads is them. Do you really need meds? I manage my depression without them. And then this is the me, the response.
You do? Oh.
Right,
That bridesmaids?
Yeah.
Love bridesmaids.
Love that. And then this one here, this one makes me laugh. POV, my pals and I trying to release all the trauma trapped in our bodies.
Oh, you gotta
Oh,
strut
fuck,
your
this one's
stuff. That's good. You take it out. 10 in. All right. I do it again. That's nice.
Holy shit. Holy fuck. Kristen Wiig.
That's really funny.
I got one more. This one's my therapist. Therapist says, any activities you like to do to release your trauma?
Then I like to kick, stretch, and kick.
Oh, God damn it, SNL.
I personally do that one too.
So good. But I love that. You know, I think that's, again, it's like you're taking something that people get weird about.
Mhm.
You're taking something that's like extremely relatable and sorry, not relatable. You're taking something that's extremely commonplace, like anxiety or depression or PTSD.
Yeah.
And you're making it, you're bringing the humor into it, but you're also making it like, you are making it very relatable by doing this, right? And you're making it like safe
Yeah.
for people to feel like they can like be let into this community that you've created, which I just think is so amazing. To that point, I guess, you know, as we're coming to time here, but just a couple more questions. What is, you know, in trying to do this work that you're doing right now,
Mhm.
how is this being received in Dubai? What's the like status? What's the sort of overall kind of views on speaking out about mental health from a cultural perspective over in the UAE?
So the conversation's honestly just begun. There was a lot of taboo around mental health, around suicide, but laws are changing. The healthcare system is ramping up, and there's a lot more conversation. So when you're on social media, you'll have healthcare centers, you'll have psychologists, you'll have psychiatrists that are based here in Dubai actually talking about stuff on social media, and everyone's engaging because they're like, oh, finally, you know, we have something going on here. Nonetheless, the conversation is still, I'd say, you know, we always say, let's talk about mental health, let's break the stigma. But sometimes we're still in the nice area, the not so messy area. You know, we're like mental health, depression, surface level stuff. But the stuff that I want to get into is the messy stuff, you know, the stuff where people are, what's really going on for people who are suffering? You know, let's talk about people not being able to get out of bed rotting, not being able to brush their teeth, not being able to comb their hair, all of the things that bring up shame. And I think there's still room for that to be talked about, because there's a fear of being vulnerable. Like, already this is a new space. Mental health, talking about it, is essentially a new space for us here in Dubai. And so I'm hoping that we get to this space where we can really talk about things. And that's why I say I want to share radically and authentically, no filter, because the messy stuff is the stuff that needs to be talked about. And people need to know. And when you talk about the messy stuff, other people are like, oh my God, you know what? I was going through that too. And I didn't tell anyone about it because, gosh, it's so embarrassing. And suddenly there's more conversation. There's more authentic conversation. Like sometimes we are talking, we're like, I get depressed. What does it mean? What does it mean for you to be depressed? Like, what do you actually go through? What are the struggles that you actually go through on a regular basis? You know, is your house, did you not be able to wash your dishes? Have you not showered for a week or more? Like, I want to know because, you know, we're here together and this is a struggle together and we need to help each other tangibly without just the nice words. So, I mean, that's slowly coming up in Dubai to just be a little bit more authentic, to make more space for vulnerability around these subjects. And I'm hoping that it takes off.
It reminds me that, like, I feel like something that, and even in, Canada, where we've been talking about this, I think we've been doing a better job talking about mental health, definitely over the past 5 or 6 years. But an interesting thing that I find is mental health and mental illness are still synonymous with one another.
Yeah.
And so we talk about our mental health and we're like, you need to be, you need to pay attention to your mental health, which is like a state of well-being. Like, how is your mental health? But then there's mental illness.
Yeah.
And, because we conflate the two, then people like to think in the safer space of like, oh, like, are you taking care of your mental health? But they're not really willing to think about like, well, what does mental illness really look like?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's like you state how it's a new space in Dubai, and it's probably in a newer kind of state than it is like here in Canada. But even then, even saying that,
it's new in general.
It's fucking new in general.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah,
people
it's new
just
everywhere.
it's just not one of those things that
Varying
we've like
degrees
come
of
to
new.
terms with or come to grips with. Because again, and it's all shrouded in things like shame and from a societal standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, from wherever you're coming at it from, it's a lot of that is just based in shame. And if you can't see it, well, might as well not really fully talk about it. It's like if it's not visible, if it's not on the surface, I don't know. I don't know if it's really worth going into that, because like, who knows where that might take us, right?
Yeah,
And that's the thing that we got to see shift. I'm so glad that there's someone like yourself doing this work over in Dubai. I mean, you are the second out of 3 conversations that we've kind of had lined up to talk to people out of Dubai specifically about mental health, and this has been just an absolute delight.
You're amazing.
Yeah. Like just and what a wonderful storyteller. And I before we wrap here, I would love for you to just let anyone who's curious about the work that you do, if they want to keep up with the hilarious and useful memes that you put out there, how can people find you? How can people stay up to date with the work that you're doing?
The best place to find me and stay up to date is on my page on Instagram, which is I am brave and free. I'll also have some merch that I design myself, which I have on there, and other resources as well that I'm building up on. But that's the main place that everyone can connect with.
Amazing.
And we should say
show notes as well.
Yeah, we should say that there's so much other work that we haven't had a chance to talk about with you today that you're doing or involved in, and so I really encourage people to go and check out some of that work that you're doing too. That I'm sure that they can find out through your Instagram. So,
well, like I said, Anna, this has been just an absolute delight. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to sit down and chat with us. This has been so much fun.
No, thank you for having me.
So I feel like the last I feel like over the last few weeks, we've had some conversations that have been rather heavy, which is great. Let's, we're in
That's
the
what we
business
do.
of doing that.
That's
sometimes.
what we do.
And so I figured for the wrap up today, we'd cover something that's a little bit more uplifting and like really wholesome and sweet.
Like a little silly too, maybe.
Like feel good.
And then we're also going to get a little silly.
Little silly billies.
We're going to talk about tragedy, but tragedy that like
Is hilarious.
like kind of got to bite your lip.
Oh. Am I going to, do we run the risk of getting in trouble with the broader population?
No, I don't think so. But let's start
Thank
off
God.
with the wholesome sweet stuff. So, have you guys heard about Providence living at the Views? Have you heard about this yet?
Providence living, like Providence the place or Providence the type, like the,
Providence living at the Views.
okay. This sounds
Views
like
VIEWS.
VIEWS.
This
Providence
sounds like-
living at the Views.
this sounds like the kind of marketing that you see around like old age living communities.
That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking.
Well, actually, you're onto something there. So, Canada's first public long-term care home based on the concepts of dementia villages welcomes its inaugural residents in Edmonton, in Emotional Move-In Day. In Edmonton.
I was like, wow, that's way off.
In an emotional move-in day. So, in a historic moment for seniors care in Canada, Providence living at the Views.
This is like that community in what was it, Belgium?
Yeah, it was over in Europe somewhere.
Guile or something
Yes,
like that.
that's right. So Canada now has one, our first one. It's the nation's first public long-term care home based on the concept of dementia village. They welcomed their first residents on July 8th, 2024. The state-of-the-art care home village in Edmonton, actually in Comox, British Columbia, represents a significant step forward in providing compassionate, personal-centered care for seniors with and without dementia.
It's like a dementia theme park.
Yeah. Not really. It's just its own little village that can be supportive for people that live with dementia.
But I would like to know from you, Brian,
Canadians with dementia, not
not our friends to the south.
Joe Biden won't be staying there. Hey,
That's so topical. Brian, I'd like to
Actually,
know
do you want to show you someone who moved
what
in?
kind of attraction you might find, like you might think you'd find at a dementia theme park.
It wasn't about the attractions. It was about the vibe. When you go to a theme park and you
No,
just
I know,
feel
Brian,
it in
but
your
describe a ride.
heart. It'd be
or a
like
game.
like the when you go into a mirror house, like you're like not sure if what you're seeing is real or not.
Right.
Be like that, but everything.
Are we trying to get him canceled? Is that what you're trying to do there, Tay?
I was trying to inch him towards it.
But I was genuinely thinking, like, when I said theme park, I thought about like the spirit of a theme park. When you go in and like everything's like a little bit make believe, but it has that energy that like it could be real. And
Long lines,
one thing that we've heard when you're talking
overpriced concessions.
when you're talking to people with
Restrictions based on your height.
dementia is to not deny their reality, but to like sort of embrace it, that can be helpful for them. And so you're not supposed to be like, well, that's not there. You're not seeing that. That's not true.
Can we acknowledge
like-
the drill? Just in case it's coming through our mics.
Yeah, if you're listening to this, don't worry, you don't have dementia. That's just
There's a-
That's an actual
Someone's
drill.
drilling in our building.
someone's drilling
But yeah,
somewhere.
I think I was making a good point,
Sounds like
guys.
the drill's about to come out of the back of this fucking thing into my head. Fuck, guys. Holy shit.
Yeah.
So I want to show you a video.
Good job. You handled that well, Brian.
I want to show
Thank
you
you.
a video of
All my
The-
media training with the CBC.
the first person to be welcomed to the village, Natty Perinas, mother of Edie Perinas, and grandmother of my friend Edith. Natty was also a contestant from the 9th season of The Amazing Race Canada. Maybe that was Edie. Edie was. I was going to say if Natty was,
That would be super impressive.
Natty, yeah, she would have crushed it.
I just want to say, I think we have to acknowledge the fact that it looked like she may or may not have been arriving at a theme park.
Definitely,
I mean,
yeah.
yeah,
It sort of did.
It sort of did.
Big
yeah.
parking
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, a big
Beautiful
to-do,
ribbon.
as
Yeah.
someone probably from her
And no
era would
lines.
say.
to wait in.
Just acknowledge that the vibe was there.
So she's the first resident to make the journey from the previous existing long-term care home, the Views at St. Joseph's, to the new care home village, accompanied by her son and daughter-in-law, Allie Sellers, who is also a contestant on the show. Whole bunch of family members from The Amazing Race, basically.
Wow.
So the move-in day was a heartwarming display of community support and meticulous planning as nearly 90 volunteers and staff members came together to ensure a smooth transition for the 156 residents. Remarkably, the entire move was completed in less than 6 hours, with Miss Perinas leading the way as the first resident to settle into the new care home village. How about that?
That's
now,
awesome.
Here's my question about the new village, because as we know, there's a number of small villages that house certain populations of people, like this one, the Dementia Village, but we also have the Olympic Village, right?
Right.
We're bringing a bunch of athletes in. Now, I know the Olympic Village, they were having there was a bit of an issue with a bit of a sex problem, bit of an issue with the safe sex, something about condoms or something. I don't know if they were didn't want to give them out, or maybe they were giving out too many, but
Sex is a prolific problem in long-term care.
yeah. And now we've got not a long-term care home, but we got a long-term care village. So what's what kind of ramifications what kind of things do we need to think about? What kind of things are we going to be
Ethics.
covering on this podcast in about a year or two when we start finding out that the Dementia
I'll tell you what we
Village
need
has
to think
turned
about.
into
We need to think about latex.
has turned into a hedonist tourist destination.
Well, the biggest
you know?
debate is about the ethics around consent.
Well, there's that, but if you want to take something, making it a real fucking bummer, Brian, I guess you're right. There's that.
Because
Well, I
he
mean,
was
I'm
joking.
just
He was on a jokey joke train, and you
And I'm
took it
being-
into a reality. We really need to think about this place.
And that's the great thing about the show, is that you get the balance of both perspectives.
That's right. Well, let's move on to something where we don't really have to think about much, which is about how eating records have changed and why you can't attempt to eat the biggest meal ever anymore.
Guys, I just want to say, speaking of eating records, I just saw the most recent Mr. Beast video where he had like 100 YouTubes fighting it out for $1 million for their subscribers in one video. It's really good. But the best part was the eating competition.
Really good.
Dude, Mr. Beast is just an online Hunger Games.
The best part
Yeah.
of the video was when they brought out Joey Chestnut to judge the eating competition. It wasn't an eating competition. It was like it was a food making competition.
Yeah. Oh.
And I was surprised that a guy who eats that much had anything to say about taste. You know, like,
Yeah.
Joey?
yeah,
Well,
You
he
think
doesn't.
He can't be
taste
tasting
anything?
much, dude.
He doesn't really
Right.
stop to appreciate.
right. So,
I mean, I don't know if there's much to stop to appreciate when you're just scarfing hot dogs and water to give it down quicker. You know, like just hot dog water basically is.
yeah.
Yes, chocolate starfish.
So this is actually fucking horrendous. Guinness Book of World Records. You guys heard about this?
I have.
It's a book that holds a bunch of world records.
Speaking of which, Joey Chestnut has Guinness World Record for the most world records.
Oh, interesting.
Guys,
Okay.
is the Guinness Book of World Records tied to Guinness the beer company?
Yes, it is.
It is?
Yes.
We know this?
Yes, 100%. It came from the origin of Guinness putting a like world record sort of like pamphlet in the bars.
It's
And
kinda-
it
it's-
became like the like leading publication
So it's like
of
Michelin.
world
It's
records.
like Michelin, yeah.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah. It really is.
Yeah. So
Fascinating.
eating records have been a thing in the Guinness Book of World Records, and they have changed a lot over the history of the Guinness Book of World Records. Many kinds of records, many ways that the Guinness Book of World Records view and like think about records have changed, but eating is one of the big ones that has changed the most. As more has been learned about the effects of gluttony, the world record of breaking that has to do with eating stuff basically had to adapt based on the more we knew about
Like how
gluttony.
horrific.
Well,
it is
wasn't
for
there
you?
an eating record
Yeah.
for eating a plane?
well
The guy that was eating
yeah.
all of those machines.
Yeah.
yeah,
French
so,
guy.
So I don't know if that was Guinness. That might have just been
It
that
had
guy's.
to have
I
been.
think that was that guy's just
Oh.
a little bit of
No, that was
like his own-
Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Yeah, Ripley's. I think Ripley's is like the Wild West.
Yeah, they're like the
Yeah.
Mad TV to the SNL.
They're the cracked news. So these days, we don't actually monitor record attempts for how much a person can eat in an unlimited amount of time. That's over. That used to be a thing. It's no longer
in
a
an
thing.
unlimited amount of time.
Yes, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Good thing we shut that down.
Instead, what we do is we set a short time limit, 3 minutes at the most, for a person to eat the most of one particular item, or we time how quickly they can eat a certain thing, right?
Can they eat that drill?
Somebody out there would.
Did the experience of that drill change just now?
Yeah, it feels like it's
Feels like it's wild.
feels like it's about to come up into my butthole now. So, for example, you could attempt to eat the most pasta eaten in 3 minutes, right? Or Joey Chestnut, how many hot dogs can you eat in X amount of minutes or whatever? The most sausages eaten in 1 minute is another one. Or the fastest time to eat a burrito.
It's a speed run now.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not like a actual capacity problem as much as it is
Which is Joey
as it is a
Chestnut's
speed
jam.
thing.
Well, you also have those who are down to like try the spicy stuff. So the fastest time to eat 50 Carolina Reaper peppers.
Oh my
Wow.
God.
That's got to be a health hazard. Now that used to be the record for the world's hottest pepper until it was dethroned a couple of years ago or last year by Pepper X. Or another one is attempt the fastest time to drink a bottle of hot sauce. I actually did that. I drank a bottle of Tabasco in high school for $5.
Wow.
Yep.
That's not too bad.
$5.
Tabasco is not even hot. It's probably hot if you drink a bottle of it.
$5?
It's
$5.
not easy.
$5.
I'll tell you, it didn't leave me. I was different after.
I'll give you
tell you that much.
$5. I'll give you $5
Dude,
to
I
do it
would
right
never.
now.
I would never do that again for $1 million. I'd do it for $1 million.
Yeah, you would.
But I would never do that again. It was fucking awful. But you should try it, Taylor. It's not that bad. But there was a time when we used to monitor a record called Largest Meal Eaten.
Mm.
Now, the record still exists today, but it's not one that you can apply for. And it was featured in an episode of Guinness World Records podcast Behind the Book recently when editor-in-chief Craig Glenday shared the shocking and tragic tale. So 8 a.m. on a Sunday in 1983, there was a 23-year-old woman who arrived at the emergency department of Royal Liverpool Hospital complaining of abdominal pain. Her belly button had popped out like you'd expect to see during pregnancy.
Yeah.
And she was finding it difficult to breathe. Nurses had asked her what the fuck was going on. And eventually she confessed that between the hours of midnight the night before and 4 a.m. that morning, she had sat down for what she referred to as a late dinner. Now, what she ate, this is really sad. She dies, okay? So she doesn't make
fuck.
it.
Oh, Jesus.
Spoiler alert, she died under the care of those
It's probably
nurses.
good that you said that so we laugh less while you're saying that.
This isn't so
Well,
silly.
here we go. So what she ate was what doctors believed at the time to be the biggest meal ever eaten by an individual, and it stands to this day. It is. According to correspondence published in the medical journal The Lancet, volume, if you want to follow up on this, volume 325, issue 8432, the 6th of April, 1985, her meal weighed, let's take a guess here. And now, be careful as you guess, right? Like think about the weight of a meal, okay? If you were going to weigh everything.
Yeah.
Do they say
Let's go in pounds.
I'm familiar.
Yeah, right. You're tracking
Yeah.
your macros right now, right?
Yep.
So, like, what would a meal weigh? A typical meal weigh? 'Cause you're looking at grams.
Like a big meal.
Yeah.
Maybe like 800 to 1,000 grams of food. I
Okay.
would guess I'm eating.
And so, how many grams in a pound is 800 grams? Or no, that's 8 ounces.
450, something like that.
Okay. All right. So, like a couple of pounds.
Couple pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. How much do you think her meal weighed?
Do we have any information as to what she weighed?
No, we don't.
Okay. You go first, Brian.
I don't think it fucking matters, to be honest with you.
I think-
I'll go first because you're better at that.
I
You'll be
really,
better
I
at
don't
it,
think it matters.
Doesn't matter.
I
You
don't.
go
I really
first.
don't. I think anybody who ate this is
I'm
gonna
gonna
die.
say that she ate 30 pounds.
I think that's a lot.
Yeah.
I would
You
say
think that's a lot?
I would say just under 20 pounds, maybe like 16 pounds actually.
Brian, you win 19 pounds, 8.6 kilograms.
I shouldn't have said 16. I should have said.
You should have just stuck
under
with what you
20.
said.
That was great.
So that, and for reference, that's heavier than the heaviest bowling ball you'll ever find at a local bowling alley. That's
Whoa.
just slightly by a pound around the weight of a full tire for your car.
You mean bowling balls in like not in an East Coast bowling alley?
No, I'm talking
in
about like the fucking 3-finger big old bowling ball.
Full size American ball.
Yeah,
we got little balls here.
we do have little
we do
balls,
have little
here, yeah.
balls here.
So she ate 19 pounds of food.
That's a lot.
Now again,
As is that
she
drill.
shows up to the hospital. She can't breathe. She's in agony, which makes a bit of sense. 4 hours later, okay, mind you. Now, here's what the meal comprised of. 1 pound of liver. That's 453 grams, okay? 2 pounds of kidneys. 0.5 pounds of steak.
She's just eating a human.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, she's a cannibal.
2 eggs. 1 pound of cheese. 2 large slices of bread. Just 2 slices. I mean, that's pretty regular.
2 slices is so regular.
Yeah.
Pretty chill on the bread.
I feel like that
1 pound
did her in.
of here she goes
She
again.
didn't want to pack it with the
Here she
carrot.
goes again. 1 pound of mushrooms. 2 pounds of carrots. Hey, she's getting all the food groups in. 1 cauliflower. Just 1 cauliflower. Well, whole
A
cauliflower.
whole cauliflower head.
10 peaches. 4 pears. 2 apples. 4 bananas. 2 pounds of plums. 2 pounds of grapes. And 2 glasses of milk.
She must. Oh, dude, the milk is what did it.
25 burgers. 25 fries. 25.
No, she must. Dude, whoever.
Wait.
For the people who get that, they're gonna laugh so hard.
Wait, how do they know? How do they know what she ate?
She must have
was
said it.
She was doing it with with.
Oh,
a
they just
crew,
cut her
like-
open, opened her belly, and went, here it all is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
None of it-
she would have
she would
said.
have told them.
But
But do you think that she was like? I mean, this is the world record, right? So like, but it's not
But
like
she
it was
wasn't
like an
attempting.
official
She wasn't
record
attempting.
attempt.
she
right?
was just by
Yeah.
herself.
I think she was
She was
just
by herself?
She had a
having
psychotic
yeah,
break.
she was having a late dinner.
No.
No, she was having a psychotic
That
break.
is what she said. She
must
was
have been.
having a late dinner. Well,
mu-
we don't know. She could have been really hungry.
I think she was going for it, like trying
Maybe
to
she was
impress her
intermittent
friends.
fasting. We don't know. That's the thing. We don't know. So an abdominal x-ray confirmed the diagnosis of what's called acute postprandial gastric dilation. Basically, she burst. She turned into the blueberry boy.
Oh my God.
Oh no.
In Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Various efforts were made to save the patient, but
Jesus Christ.
she died.
Did she have a history? Is there anything that says she had a history of like trying to eat large quantities, or like was this a total
No, I think she was just.
random?
Yeah, no, I got nothing. So I mean, she could have been, or she could have been just a regular person who just was like really hungry. It's really hard to say. We
Wow.
really just don't know. So Craig, the guy from the
I'm
Guinness
starting to
Book
get the feeling that you just made all this up.
Yeah, I did. No, this is real. This is from the this is from the Guinness Book of World Records.com website. So it's
Whoa.
pretty
Do
legit.
you guys remember watching Guinness World Records, the show? In particular, the thing that stands out to me is like the woman who makes her eyeballs poke out,
Yeah.
and then
I can hate
like the yoga dude who got in the tiny glass box and held his breath and like got himself into the little pretzel. Do you remember that?
Was
Pretty
that,
sure
was
his
that
name
Guinness
is David
Book of World
Blaine.
Records?
No, it wasn't David Blaine. That was Guinness.
so
That was Guinness
Or
World
was
Records.
that
The guy who kind of looks and sounds like Mike Rowe.
sounds
but he
more
isn't.
like Unsolved Mysteries.
So the book, back to the Guinness Book of World Records, how it's changed over the days. So again, they don't take applications for the largest meal ever eaten anymore. This is the kind of record that's researched and submitted by medical experts, and one that's not considered safe for people to attempt by themselves. As well as stories like this from medical history, we've reported on the competitive side of eating since our first edition. So they've been doing that for years. The book included records from people who had consumed huge amounts of food in one sitting, and even chronicled records for downing astonishing amounts of alcohol. That's fucking wild. Can't be doing that today.
Wild.
Yeah.
By the 1970s, records like this covered half a page of our book. There was even a record for eating. This one's fucking wild. A record for eating live goldfish, 210 to be exact.
Oh
But this
my
is certainly not
God.
something that they would condone today.
But wait, you just eat them and then and
They
they
die.
they die. in
They
your
die
stomach.
in
Yeah,
your
I would
stomach.
say they die pretty quick,
I think
getting
I
all
could do-
acidy up.
I could probably do 210.
Yeah, man, your stomach acid. Like Kyla said this the other day. She said something like, she said something about swallowing a bug or something like that. And she was like, "Oh, but that would be bad, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, bad for the bug."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's not like it's. Remember when you like you tell kids like don't swallow those watermelon seeds or they'll sprout out in your belly and they'll pop out of your belly button at night. You tell
Yeah,
your
yeah.
kids that.
Yep.
It's
That's-
that's not true. And the bugs also aren't going to nest
No
in your
way.
belly
No.
and fly out.
I
of
mean,
your
this
belly.
is how that guy
it's quite
ate
an
that plane.
inhospitable environment.
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That
Okay.
that was that's crazy.
And also sad.
What's the biggest meal you guys have ever eaten?
The biggest meal.
That's
I've
what I
ever
would have
eaten.
done after 1 pound of liver. I wouldn't have been able to do that.
I don't think I've really ever engaged in like a gargantuan amount of food eating.
No.
I think I know what it. Oh no, you didn't do the burgers. Dennis did the burgers.
I did burgers with Dennis and my dad.
But you both
and
did it.
someone else. 50 cheeseburgers from McDonald's. We were at 100 once with more guys though, which wasn't as impressive. Probably
Yeah,
the biggest
I think
meal
I was there for the 100.
I had
I hate this.
I had 2 of the like lumberjack breakfasts from Sam's
That's too much. That's a lot.
on my birthday, which is like
I was there
which
for
is
that.
like 12 pieces of
Yeah.
toast.
I don't
a lot.
like
It's a
that
lot.
feeling
Yeah.
at all.
No, it's
me
very
neither.
bad.
And then I had a piece of cake afterwards.
Guys, I leave my in-laws' house without fail sick from eating too much food.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like there's something in the air. Sometimes I even don't eat that much and I leave feeling sick, like food sick. And I'm like, how? How did that happen? It's
You
crazy.
wish it wasn't like that?
Yeah, I do.
You should make a point, and next time you go there, you should go in and be like, hey, I just, thank you so much, guys. I love this. Can I today I'm going to eat 1 pound of liver, 2 pounds of kidneys, 0.5 pounds of steak, 2 eggs, 1 pound of cheese, 2 large slices of bread, 1 pound of mushrooms, 2 pounds of carrots, 1 cauliflower, 10 peaches, 4 pears, 2 apples, 4 bananas, 2 pounds of plums, 2 pounds of grapes, and 2 glasses of milk. Thank you so much.
You know what I love? How
And
that,
then die,
that kind
and
of,
then they'll go, you know what? Let's stop
we should
feeding
stop
Taylor
feeding, we should
that
stop
much.
feeding him too much. I love how that kind of started to sound like the 12 Days of Christmas at the end.
It did actually.
1 pound of live. All right, that's it, folks. Thank you, Anna, for sharing your story, and thank you for tuning in, folks. We hope you're enjoying this, and we'll be back next week with a lovely episode. Until then, support the podcast. Go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave a rating and review. And also, you could come to our Discord, which is a cool place to hang out, meet friends, and have chats. Lovely. And tell somebody you love about the podcast. That's always important. So thanks again for tuning in, and thanks for your support.
And if you want to be a guest on the show or share an experience where you accidentally ate too much food and made your tummy ache,
Or die.
Yep. Gonna have to get that story retroactively.
Could be a loved one.
Could be a loved one
Happened to your loved
sharing
one.
your story for you on your behalf. Go to sickboypodcast.com and fill out the guest form.
And if you want to just tell us about it and not come on the show, you can send us an email
You
at
can do
letters
that
at
too, yeah.
sickboypodcast.com.
Yeah,
Yep.
Thanks, Jeff Lonis, Donovan Morgan. We love you guys. Thanks for helping make this show happen. We love you.
That's it for this week.
I'm Brian.
I'm Taylor.
And I'm Jeremy, and this is Sick Boy.